Hey, I'm Lindsay Lyman. I worked almost 12 years at Amazon and saw so many brilliant and successful overachievers burn themselves out and leave their jobs because they're so stressed and anxious. But guess what? Having a successful career does not have to be at the expense of your mental sanity and personal time. There's an easier way, and I can show you how. Let's do this.
Hey y'all. All right, I'm traveling and my mic is not working, so I apologize. The audio is not super great on this episode, but this message is so important. I didn't want to skip this week. I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. So, if any of you are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, I'm a huge fan of his. He's written like 7 New York Times bestseller books. He was named as Time Magazine one of their most 100 influential people. Some of the books you may be familiar with that he wrote are things like The Tipping Point, Blink, How to Talk to Strangers. I'm just a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan. He's a very brilliant researcher and author. And I attended a conference a couple weeks ago, and he was one of the keynote speakers. And he shared this message that I have been thinking about ever since and really noodling on. And I'm still thinking about it, but I wanted to share kind of the main idea to get you thinking about it as well and how it applies in a work setting, in your teams, in your career, and even kind of in how you engage in the world around you. So he started off by telling about two different men that had given very large sums of money to different colleges. So the first one was Henry Rowan, and he was an engineer. He started a business. He became very successful at what he did. And one of his friends was a VP at a college and was trying to get him to buy a table at a fundraiser that they were doing for their business school. This small school is about to go bankrupt. And Henry basically said, well, I'm an engineer fan. I don't really like business, but I like engineering. Do you have an engineering school? And he said, no. But what he ultimately did was Henry Rowan gave $100 million donation. This was back in 1992. So, I mean, $100 million is still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But in 1992, this was pretty much unheard of for people to make these types of donations to a college. So he gave this donation and they started an engineering school. Malcolm Gladwell went on then to tell about John Polson, and he is a hedge fund guy from New York. He's made billions and billions of dollars, and he kind of, lives the type of life you would expect a billionaire to live. And he wanted to give a donation to a university. He is also someone that's interested in engineering, so he gave $400 million to Harvard. So he talked a lot about these two. These are two very rich men that are both very focused in engineering. They're both very focused in philanthropy. They're both giving away a lot of their money. Henry Rowan gave his money to a small school. So he gave $100 million to a school that had $787,000 in the bank at the time. John Polson gave $400 million to a school that had $53 billion at the time. So the question Malcolm Gladwell was kind of posting to us was, what was the best use of that money? How do you kind of direct your resources to make things better? And I really like the approach he talked about because we all could have our opinions. You could look at the data, and Malcolm did give a lot of the data on these schools, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But so how do you use these resources? It comes down to the fundamental question of, is it going to have a bigger impact to give more to the school that has less money, to quote unquote the weaker school, the smaller thing? Or is it going to have bigger impact to give your money to the stronger thing, to the school that already has a strong, solid foundation, a lot of money, lots of things going for it already? So he then went on to kind of talk about sports and how you could kind of compare these two things in the same way, but with a slightly different lens. When you look at soccer, for example, he describes soccer as, no question, you want to be improving your weakest player, because soccer is a mistake-driven game. You look at how low the scores are in a soccer game, it's 0-1, 1-2, right? These are very low scores. They're completely interactive. They are highly dependent on people. He talked about, before someone tries to make a goal in a soccer game, on average, that ball gets touched 48 times back and forth. So if one of those passes between those 48 touches doesn't work out, you have to reset the clock before someone is going to be able to try to shoot the ball in the goal. Everything needs to be executed perfectly. So when you're thinking about things on a soccer team, you're only as good as your poorest player. He then went on to contrast that to basketball. It's kind of the opposite. It's not as interactive. Someone can independently grab the ball, dribble it all the way down the court, and put it in the basketball hoop, right? Someone could technically do that in soccer as well, but it's not as common as it is in basketball. In a basketball setting, there's been very successful teams that have had 2 to 3 really strong top players. You need the other players there to kind of do their part, but if you've got a couple big players, they can carry the team. And so in this sense, this is what he calls a strong link team. So he talks about this from like a weak link or a strong link. It's not that a weak link is bad, it's where do you put your time and resources? In soccer, you're going to get a bigger return on your investment helping your weakest player. In basketball, you're going to get a bigger return on your investment helping your strongest player. So he then goes on to talk about how do things function in the world? And ultimately, kind of what direction are we heading? And I pose this question to you as well. And I want you to think about it in the world, in your life, in your job, in your leadership style, in your organization, at your company. Are you guys a strong link team or a weak link team? Again, one is not better than the other. There's a time and a place for both. But what's really got me thinking is as things have shifted and changed from a technology standpoint, we as a society have shifted from a strong link to a weak link. But sometimes we fumble because how we're supporting people and what we're doing to help everyone get there, we're still in that strong link mindset. I'll give you a couple examples. He talks about aviation, right? If you're trying to fly somewhere, all the components, all the pieces, it's highly interactive. Everything has to work properly for it all to work out. If there's a snowstorm in New York City and flights get canceled, that is going to have a ripple effect all across the country. Because if this flight gets canceled and that plane's not available to get here, it impacts the entire system. You could look at like the Boeing 737 with the MAX system. That's this tiny piece of software that people didn't really use very often, but it grounded Boeing 737s to a halt and cost Boeing billions of dollars. So here, this massive $1 million plane had this tiny piece of software that wasn't working, and it stopped everything. Okay, that is a weak link system. Everything across the board has to be functioning properly in order to reach your end goal. He talked a little bit then about how we fight fires. Back in the day, you used to send the team into the field and the fire chief was the one like given direction. It was a strong link system. Your ability to fight that fire and get it under control and to have as little damage as possible was really dependent on how strong your firefighters were and how good your fire chief was at giving directions and that the team functioned together. Now what happens? The firefighters get in an SUV, they throw a server in the back, they drive out into the forest, they put a whole bunch of sensors in the ground, and they're processing the information real time, and they're making decisions about how they should go about trying to contain and put out this fire. We don't need one smart person making decisions now as we fight fires. We need 40 people in the field who know how to make the right decisions. In that instance, firefighting has shifted from a strong link system to a weakest link system. And as we think about this, we're continuing to kind of struggle to manage this transition. You look at what happened during COVID. The fact that we were able to create a vaccine in as short amount of time as possible is a miracle. Whether you pro-vaccination or not, irrelevant. Vaccines used to take decades and decades to create. But now, because we've been investing in that technology, we've been investing in people, we've been investing in that strong link system of the smartest people to go out and do the research and have the data and have the information, we were able to create a vaccine at a very accelerated rate. But if you also look at the healthcare system, It's in a total crisis these days, and it has been for a while. And it's no secret, in the US, the healthcare system is in a crisis because of nurses. I'm not saying nurses are the weakest link, but COVID had put a lot of stress on nurses. So a lot of them left, a lot of them quit, and then we overworked the ones that stayed, and we worked them like crazy, and now they're quitting. And now the cost for hospitals to run and function is almost 3 times as much because of the impact not having nursing staff is having, and entire hospitals are having to shut down because of it. When we look at a health center, it's shifting from this strong link to a weak link, but it's failing because we continue to treat it as, well, the surgeons and the doctors and the high up are the most important. We need to put all of our time and investment there. When in reality, it is a weak link system, meaning if everyone doesn't do their part, the whole system fails. Okay. And he went on to give a ton of other examples. It was this brilliant, fascinating talk. If you ever get the chance to hear Malcolm Gladwell speak, I highly encourage you to go do it. But as I've been thinking about this, there's been a couple things that have come to mind. The first question I had was, okay, well, how do you know if it's a weak link or a strong link system, right? And you've got to kind of look at it and really evaluate it. But I think it ultimately comes down to how interactive is the work. And the more technology we use, the more complex and bigger the problems and systems are, I think the more interactive the work is becoming. And I also don't think all of your job is either a weak link type of job or a strong link type of job. I think we do a little bit of both. So, for example, software development engineers, I would argue developing software is a strong link system. A good SDE is worth their weight in gold. You want to find that superstar, that amazing employee, and support them and deliver them and let them do whatever they need to go and build that code. At the end of the day, when a software development engineer is writing and delivering code, it is not a hugely interactive thing. They can do it from start to finish. Do we want help and support? Is there a bigger picture involved? Totally. But if we look at from a system standpoint, SDE work at its core is a strong link system. However, the process of delivering that work, having people engage with it, have people get the help they need, that is a weak link system. That requires hundreds and hundreds of different people and processes and systems. You have to know how to talk about it. Maybe you have to sell it. You have to get people engaged. You need the financial system behind it. Maybe you need to translate it into multiple languages. Like, there's so many different components of it. It's now a weak link system. You could have the most amazing, fast, brilliant technology, but if people aren't ultimately engaging with it and understanding the value, at the end of the day, it's just code that sits on a shelf and does nothing. We are shifting more and more to this weak link system, and we're terrible at managing this transition. I don't know the answer to be like, here's what you do to make it all better. I think it's something we need to keep working on. But look at your systems and processes that are no longer working and think of it through this lens of, is this because the mechanism, the tool was built in a strong link system and we now are on a weak link system? If so, we may need to change it. I'll give you a couple examples. So as I've mentioned, I was at Amazon for almost 12 years, and I saw a lot of change through those years. The company grew immensely in a lot of great big ways. And we have a whole set of different processes and mechanisms that are not a secret that have been used. But towards the end there, I continue to get frustrated because I'm like, these things do not work anymore. And as I was listening to this talk, a light bulb went off, and I was like, this is why. This is why it isn't working. So, for example, in an Amazon setting, when you have a big idea, you write a PR FAQ. It's a formal document that you go and you write kind of this press release that gives all the details about what this new idea is, what's the benefit to the customer, and how to answer a lot of the common questions, okay? I could independently go and write a PR FAQ. I could go and think of the idea. I could write the document. I could present it to all the leaders. I could get everyone super excited by it, okay? That is a strong link system. You want smart, brilliant, creative, intelligent, think outside the box people to go and do that. However, implementing that PR FAQ, launching that thing, it now flips into a weak link system. But we're still set up to have this one strong person system up there. And we continue to fail because we're not supporting things all the way from the bottom up. I look at the same thing with our OP1 process, our operating planning one process, where we go out and say for the year, this is what we think we're going to do. These are the resources we need from it. It's going to be great. I went through 12 OP1s. I'm telling you, one person ends up cobbling the document together for multiple people, but it is a strong link system. You need a few strong leaders with a few big ideas that clearly understand the business and the data, and you can go and write that document and clearly communicate it up to executives. But again, when it comes to delivering on those goals, it now shifts to a weakest link system. We could have the finances in place, we could have the code and the tool in place, but if we don't have people to actually go and market it and sell it and deliver it and take customer feedback and answer their questions, it doesn't matter how amazing your plan was, you're not going to be able to deliver it. As technology and tools and automation increases, we continue to shift to this weak link system. One of the things I'm still noodling with is I don't love the naming of strong link, weak link, because in my head, one's better than the other. And truthfully, the message Malcom was trying to drive is one is not better than the other. They're just a different place of where you put your investment. But his point was, as we come back to that story about the schools, all the data shows the return on the investment of the $100 million given to that small school had a substantially larger impact in terms of graduation rates, first-time college graduates, and people making above six figures. The numbers were 10 times better than giving that $400 million to the big school that was already succeeding. There was still an increase, don't get me wrong, it still helped, but it was a substantially larger impact and return rate when giving to that smaller school. So I'd offer to you to think about what parts of your job are strong links, what parts are weak links, how is your team and your org functioning, and what are some ways you can start supporting it from a weak link setting? Because most likely that is where you're stumbling and falling. But a lot of the time and resources are going to those strong links. Stop only putting your senior and high level people in leadership trainings, in development programs, and giving them more of your time and energy. Understand improving the weakest link is going to give you a larger return on your investment. All right, you're amazing. You got this. We'll talk soon.
If what you're learning from this podcast is helping, this is just the beginning. Each week, I offer a limited number of coffee chats so that you and I can connect one-on-one and talk specifically about what's going on for you. You'll leave this call feeling more hopeful and motivated, but I'm also going to teach you a few things to try right away to get unstuck. Space is very limited and these are free, so grab your spot before they're gone. Click the link in the show notes or go to lindsaylymancoaching.com/chat and sign up today. You got this.